So repetition statements or loops are sets of code that you can use to repeat the same actions over and over and over. Okay, so it's a code structure, repeats actions until you meet some kind of ending condition. For example, you want user input. You repeatedly accept user input until you get a valid input. For example, the password requirement is that the character is at least 10 characters long. If somebody enters in 8 characters, then you repeat the request. Or initializing a set of array elements. We haven't really talked about arrays yet, but we understand an array is a group of data of the same kind. And so if we want to set all of the elements in an array, we could use a loop to do that. And various data sorting algorithms that we'll eventually get through towards the end of this course. So Java has 3 basic approaches. There's the while, there's the do while, and there's the for. Okay, the for, as it happens, is just a shorthand version of the while loop. So I'm going to do a quick comparison here. So we're going to introduce these 3. Okay, so if we have a while loop, okay, that's the first one. This one, okay, so these are our 2 basic ones. This is the while on the left. The while loop tests the condition. If true, it executes statements in the loop block. And if not, if the test condition is false, then skips the loop block. Okay, so it just goes on as if it wasn't even there. That's it. Okay, then after executing statements in the loop block, test condition is checked again. Okay, so if the condition is true, you execute all the statements in the loop block, and you go back up and test the condition again. If it's still true, you repeat the loop block again, and you keep on doing that until the condition is false. In a do while loop, on the other hand, okay, first executes the loop block. As they say in the old Orbit commercials, no matter what. Okay, then test the condition. And then all the rest of this I can just copy and paste. Boom. And that's what we have. There we go. So if it's true, after we do the loop block, test the condition. If the condition is true, you go back up and execute the loop block again. If it's false, you skip the loop block, right? So I could delete that. So if false, proceed past the loop block, right? The program goes onward. So that's what we got there. There we go, grabbed it. Okay, then after executing the statements in the loop block, right, the test condition is checked again. And if true, you go back again, right? You just keep on doing that forever. Okay. So questions about those? Those are the 2 basic structures. And of course, we will add, whoop, I can push that back up. We'll add the last note. The for loop is just a shorthand version of the while loop. Okay, so that's it. Questions on these? All right, we'll do some examples then. Okay, so start off with the while loop. So again, in the while loop, you test the condition first. If it's false, the loop block gets skipped. Otherwise, you execute the loop block and you go back and check the loop again. Now, the test condition doesn't have to be related to any code in the loop block. You can use different variables. And in fact, the loop block code might or might not directly affect the test condition. So the test condition can be any Boolean expression, right? Doesn't matter what it is. It could be a call to a method that returns a Boolean. As long as it's a Boolean, whatever, that can be included. So basic syntax, while, then you have some Boolean expression in parentheses, and then squiggly brackets with loop block statements. Just like with an if you only have a single statement following the while, you can omit those braces. Okay, so here's some an input checker. We're gonna do this in a new class. Let's make a class in Eclipse. So we'll call this fun with loops. Give it a main method. Boom. We'll give it a scanner class as well. So java.util.import import java.util.scanner. So we have our scanner class. How do we want to do this? We have a get input. Okay. So while true, get input. Okay, we'll make it a static method so we don't have to do a specific one for a class. Hold on. Kids are being loud. I'm gonna. Guys, everybody, I'm trying to lecture in here. Shush. Okay, shush. I said shush. Shush. All right. Kids have the day off school, so they're all here and not working and just generally being noisy, which is fine. Okay, so this is our get input method, and I'm just going to copy everything straight from the slides into it. So boom, we got all this. There it is. Scanner input is new scanner system.in, right? We create our scanner object. So I'll document this code. Create scanner object for user input. Okay, we're going to have a string object to store the data, store the inputs. Okay. Over here, we're going to make an initial assumption. Valid input not yet entered, which is true, right? Going into this method call, we don't have any input. So at this point, we don't have a valid input to work with. Now, our test condition, as long as is valid remains false, we keep repeating the loop. Okay, meaning we stop once we get a valid input. Okay, so as long as is valid remains false, and that's our test condition here. So while is valid is false, we're going to keep on repeating this loop. So here's our thing. Prompt user to enter the name. Okay. Read the entire text string from the console. Okay, that's this input.next line. And then assume that any name with at least one character is proper, right, is valid. So we're not going to judge. Who knows? There might be somebody out there whose name is Q or M or an asterisk. We're not going to judge about that, okay? We're just going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Well, one thing we know for sure is that somebody's name has to have at least one character. If they try to enter in a zero-length string, it's not going to be a valid name, okay? Then, since we only exit the loop after getting a valid input, we know that S will have a proper value, a proper and valid value. Okay, so that's our fun with loops. So we're going to do this. We'll see what happens. Dun, dun, dun. Please enter. Well, I'm not gonna. Okay, I'm just going to hit enter now. Ah, that's a 0 length string. I could do it again. I can do it da 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 da. Okay, and then Doug. Hello, Doug. Okay, and because it's an infinite loop, it keeps on doing this even after I enter it. Right, it prints that. But was the loop starting from? We have a loop within a loop. Okay, so I could just get rid of that while true. Just do get input. Okay, let's make this. We'll do that, and then we'll do one for a do while loop in just a moment. Okay, so questions about the while loop, questions about the code example, anything? What's happening? What do we got here? Any questions? This all makes sense, I hope, but I don't know. If it doesn't make sense, I'd like to hear from you. Okay, well, I'll move on then. Questions do not appear to be raining down. So our next part is the do while loop. So in a do while loop, the loop block executes first, then the test condition gets checked. And if the condition is false, you skip the loop block. Otherwise, the loop block executes, and then you go back, check the test condition again. So the difference is, unlike a while loop, a do while loop block will always execute at least once. Okay, we see that in the basic structure here. In a while loop, if this condition is false, you never go through the loop block. But in a do while statement, you always do the loop block once, and only then do you test the condition to see if you repeat it. Okay, so the do while loop generally makes sense in a case where you always for sure want to get the, have the loop execute at least once. So we're going to do another one. We're going to do get input 2. Make that another static void method. Okay, there we have that. Let's see what happens. We have some code. Okay, so our basic syntax, do, and then loop block statements inside squiggly brackets, and while Boolean. So again, we have a Boolean expression after the while. And same as with the while loop, loop braces can be omitted if there's only a single statement. So here's our example. Once again, suppose we want to ensure valid input. So I'm going to borrow this. It's basically the same function as we had before. So what we have here, once again, okay, I'm just going to borrow in the comments. They're basically all the same. String object to store the input. Okay. The initial assumption is that we don't have a valid input. Okay. And then we do this. We're going to do a do while loop. So first, do this. The loop block will execute once before the test condition is checked. Okay, so again, once again, we have the prompt. Read the input line. We got to call the length method. I should fix that in the slides. I'm just going to save that so I have it. Okay. And back to Eclipse. And then this input is valid if it has at least one character. Okay. Now this, do it this way. as long as we don't have a valid input, we repeat the loop block to make sure we get one. Go check my numbers. Should I have it? Okay, good. Okay, and then afterwards, display message. Okay. So let's update these a little bit. We'll do this one for last name. This is first name. And let's do hello, Mr., Mrs., Ms., Dr., whatever. Okay? So this will be this. So your first name, sure, Doug. Enter my last name, and hit enter again, and yeah, And then Lundquist, and I get my hello. Okay, easy. So there's that. Now, these two are obviously pretty much the same, right? They do basically the same thing. So what's the difference? Well, in this case, not much. The difference in some cases, if you definitely want the loop block to happen once, we'll talk about it, then it makes sense to do the do while loop. So in the case of getting user input, you're never not going to want to get user input at least once. So the do while loop is a natural structure, right? You can make sure, automatically know that it happens once, and anybody reading the code will understand that. Other cases, it's situational. For example, sometimes if you have a big slug of graphics that you want to draw, one thing you might want to check is see, did anything change that necessitates redrawing all those graphics? If not, then you skip over the whole block. There's no need to go through the whole process. Okay, but yeah, if something did, then you would. So, all right. So, now one thing that is not, students often have trouble with this. Students on exams would all often say, well, the difference between a while loop and a do while loop is that a do while loop will execute one more time than a while loop. But that's not necessarily true. In some cases it can be, but it's not automatically true. For example, look at the first loop here. Int x equals 5, do x plus equals 10, while x is less than 10. So if we start off with x is 5, we do the loop block once, we add 10 to it, and then while x is less than 10, well, x isn't less than 10 because x is 15. So we did the loop block once. Down here below, with the while loop, we have int x equals 5, while x equals 10, add 10 to x. Okay, in this case, again, we go through with 5, we check, okay, is it less than 10? Yes, so we add 10 to it, becomes 15, and then we do the test again and we skip the block. So in both cases there, it would execute once. But if we went in with x being 10, for example, the do while loop would add 10, x would equal 20, and it would exit the loop. If we went here through the while loop with x equals 10, we would say int x equals 10, this test condition would be false, and we would not execute the block at all. Okay, so in some cases, a while loop and a do while loop may both execute the same number of times. In some cases, not. All right. Also, in a sense, any while loop can be converted to a do while loop and vice versa with a little bit of contortion, right? Basically, you just have to allow for that one guarantee that the loop executes. So, for example, if you have a do while loop that is entirely equivalent to taking the loop statements, repeating them once before the loop begins, right? Because that's all this is. We execute the loop statements, and then we do the test condition to see if we repeat. Well, that's exactly the same as this. Doing the loop statements once, then testing the test condition, and as long as that test condition is true, we keep repeating the loop. Okay, so any do while loop can be converted to a while loop. While loops, well, it's not always easy to go the other way. Okay, so choosing between them. Now, in a lot of cases, you can make your code work with either kind. Okay, in fact, I would say in most cases, you can set up your code to work. So the choosing between a while and do while loop isn't usually a game-breaking decision. Bigger picture, when you're coding, you can optimize a few things, but not everything. Okay, one thing you might try to optimize is memory usage, making a small compact program that operates within a that doesn't use much memory. Now these days, most computers, memory is pretty abundant. You don't have to worry about it too much, but again, it all depends. It depends on the needs of your program versus memory availability. Second thing, execution speed. If you are willing to put the time in and use some good algorithms and possibly use memory fairly lavishly, you can make your program run much faster, right? So an obvious case of that, imagine if you're doing something with animation, and instead of constructing the images that happen at every frame of the animation, you just have them all stored on your device. And then you just read them from someplace in memory whenever you need them. That's going to run a lot faster, but of course it's also going to require a whole lot more memory. If you're talking about having, you know, gigs and gigs of image files stored, that's going to be a lot different from if you have almost no image data stored, but you have to construct them. Other couple things, ease of creation versus ease of maintenance. So sometimes when you're writing a program, especially if you're just writing it for yourself, you might want to slap it together pretty quickly, and you're not going to be really careful about documenting what all you did. If you're using variable names that you find yourself using a lot, then you're just going to look at your code and you're going to understand what the variables are. If you're using algorithms that you understand well, you might not document them carefully. You might not put in a lot of comments because you know how the algorithm works. On the other hand, if you're coding in a group session, in a group situation, it might be very necessary to include a lot of detail about that, because just because you know all the details of some algorithm doesn't mean anybody else looking at your code does. And just because you automatically recognize the way you use variables in your code doesn't mean the next guy is going to recognize them. So a lot of times in coding, you kind of, even if you don't intentionally make these decisions, yeah, you make these decisions. You can code something fast and sloppy, or you can do it careful and with the idea that somebody else is going to look at it later. So to that end, for typical applications, good way to think about it is modeling it in the most natural way. So if you know you're always going to get some input, right, like it's getting a username and password, you probably ought to use a do-while loop for that, because you're always going to get the information at least once. On the other hand, again, if sometimes the loop shouldn't execute at all, for example, if you have running a query on a database and you have a loop that would display the query results, well, what happens if the query finds no matches, right? Well, maybe a while loop is more appropriate in that case. Okay. Oh, you guys haven't been seeing me. All right. Okay, questions on any of this stuff? How are we all doing? I mean, this is pretty much it for loops. We can do some stuff on coding bat in a little bit, but this is the intro to it. I want to save some math things for a little down the road. Nothing, no questions, everybody's happy? Okay, so key takeaways. Number one, what is a while loop? How does it work? How do you code it? Okay, and number two, what is a do while loop? How does it work? How do you code it? Okay, that's pretty much what we've got so far. No questions? Everybody's happy? Everyone is content? Okay. Well, let's move on then. The last one is for loop. Okay, so for loop is a shorthand version of a while loop, and there's three components to it. Okay. First of all, there's an initialization statement. Okay, that gets executed before the test condition is checked. Second, there's a test condition. You have to have the test condition. Okay, initialization is optional, but the test condition is required because otherwise the loop doesn't know when to stop looping. And then you have an optional ending statement or a closing statement, typically an increment of the test variable. For example, if you have a number that you're using to point to different indexes in the array, and if you want to go through the array from start to finish, you start at index 0 and then you repeat through all those. So the optional ending, they'll get executed after each loop iteration. And the initialization and ending, the statements are separated by semicolons, but within those, you can have multiple statements separated by commas. So we'll look at the syntax a bit. So here, the int x, int y1, those are initialization statements. So within the bounds of this, this loop anyway, we have x and y. We can reference them. So we have int x, int y, and that happens before the loop even starts. So for all practical purposes, I'm going to lift this code, and we're going to put it in Paint. Okay, so we'll do a loop here. So put it in italics even. For int x equals 0, int y equals 0. What's our test condition? X is less than 10, I think. Yeah. X is less than 10, and then our closing statements, x plus plus, y plus plus. Okay, and then within the block, what could I do? Well, what do we do here? So we have this. I'm just going to paint it in Notepad. I don't know why I didn't do that in the first place. Okay. Okay, so this is all we're doing. So we're building a string. The string, I don't know what's going on here. Fine. So the string is going to be x plus x. That doesn't make any sense. This is a very strange situation. Okay, fine. I'm just going to leave it as is. So s is equal to x plus x, and then we print y squared plus y times y, and then we print it out. Okay, so we can lift all this code. We can put it in a for loop. We'll make a new class. Okay, so I'm just going to put this code in here. All right. Okay, I should fix that in the slides too. Okay. So there we go. We can run this. It's going to print out all the numbers. Okay. So save it. Boom. We're going to run it. And we have, okay, x is 0. Y is 1. Okay. So for every time we start with x is 0, y is 1. And so on. Eventually we get to the end. X is 9. And then when x is 9, y is 10. Then we go through at the end of the closing statement, do that again. We increment x, increment y. X goes up to 10, y goes up to 11. We do the test condition. Oh, x is less than 10. No, that's false. So we stop. And that's it. Now, the way this corresponds to a while statement, I'm just going to, this will be a little cleaner. So our for loop, we'll just do it with x. X equals 0, x is less than 10, x plus plus. Oops. Statements go here. In a while loop, we have while x is less than 10, and again, statements go here. So the correspondence is this. This int x equals 0, that needs to be up here, right? It's an initialization statement. So those two, I'm going to box them up. These correspond to each other. The same exists in both things. Okay? Our test condition, we'll do that in orange. Test condition right here. Same thing. Okay, we need a test condition. Without it, nothing makes much sense. So connect those. Okay, loop statements. Well, the loop statements are both the same. Where's this x plus 1 going to happen? Well, that would go as the last statement inside the loop. So I'm going to have to stretch that out a little bit. So this, you're going down. If I can grab it. I don't know why it's proving very resistant to being grabbed. Let's try again with a bigger one. There we go. Okay, so we get that. And then you. There we go. Okay. So then our closing statement, and we'll do, I don't know, I guess light blue for that. There it is. Okay, so that's the correspondence. For a for statement, everything has its direct counterpart in the while statement. So what's the difference? Well, in terms of effects, there is no difference. A for loop and a while loop both contain exactly the same elements. So what's the difference? Well, in terms of readability, most people find the for loop much easier to read. You can instantly see the test condition and the changes that happen at each loop iteration. Okay, in a regular while statement, right, this would be here, this would be here, they're both right at the start. But this closing statement could be buried somewhere, and it could even be on an extra screen, right? If you have a long loop, could be on a totally different screen. So yeah, you don't want to have to scroll up and down to see that stuff. Also, people get a certain familiarity. Once you're proficient at Java, any experienced programmer will look at the loop header and instantly realize what it does. Okay, so somebody's going to look at this and say, oh, x is 0, x goes less than 10, x plus plus. Okay, I'm going to iterate through this loop 10 times. Great. Okay, people are going to see that. Last, standard format makes it harder to make coding mistakes. Okay, of course, yeah, you still can make coding mistakes, but there's a spot here. There's a spot here for the closing statement. If you use a while statement, yeah, you could go on for a while and at the end forget to do the closing statement, or you could have an error in it. It would be harder to spot, right? But here, there it is. Just use that right away and you can instantly see it. So for most users, the for loop is the way to go. I mean, if you really love your while loops, you can use them. They do the same thing, but you know, most people find the for loops more user-friendly. Okay. Now there is one thing, okay? So number one, variables declared in the initialization will have their scope limited to the loop block. They belong to the loop. It's kind of strange. So let me give you an example of that in just a second. The other thing that can look really weird, omitted initialization or ending statements, right? So the first statements or the last statements, they're optional. So if you don't have them, you just leave them vacant in the for statement, which means that you could have some kind of weird syntax like, I thought I had it there. You could have something like for, okay, you could do that. And if you didn't want to keep your initialization or closing statements in there, you could, for example, just put them in the block. Okay, you could put them outside the block rather. Okay, we're going to make another thing then. So in this case, since I have this main method, can I reference X? See? It says, I don't know what X is. This is weird, right? So even though this is an opening statement, and in a sense, whoop, it should appear up above here, right? Because that's what it's doing. If I put it there, whoop, then it says, okay, I can do that. Now I know what X is, right? But this for loop situation does exactly the same thing. If I put it in there, then the int only exists inside the for block. It's a little bit strange, but you get used to it eventually. Okay. All right, so we're gonna come back. I think this is a lot of stuff to absorb. We're gonna finish this lecture tomorrow, even though there's only a few slides left. They're kind of dense slides that we can talk about for a while. But let's do something. We're going to go over to, unless there are questions. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm not seeing a lot of questions. I'm going to put us on video. There we go. Here I am. Okay. Not that you guys can see me. You have the screen share. I'm going to go over to Coding Bat, and we're going to try to find some good loop stuff. Everybody needs practice with loops. Come on, go back up. There you go. Okay, so Coding Bat. See what we find. Yay, there we go. All right, so we'll do some basic loops, right? So there are some things here with strings that we can do for the start. Okay, because we know about strings. Now we know a little bit about loops. Let's try to do some examples. Okay, what do you want to do? Anybody want to pick one? Somebody out there? Somebody? Okay, who we got? Chat. Zip zap. All right, yeah, that sounds promising. All right, I'll accept that. Okay, look for patterns like zip and zap in the string. Length 3, starting with Z, ending with P. Return a string where for all such words, the middle letter is gone, so that zip x zap would be ZP x ZP. So if we find a Z something P, we're going to remove that middle character. Okay, so this is what we want to do in this one. We'll scan through the characters, scan through the characters of str, one at a time. We'll add them to a new string. If we find a Z, we'll be on alert for a, something plus P combination. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So let's make our mirror string. So we'll do string, copy, and it's going to start off being nothing. Okay, so and then we'll do the loop. We'll do for int x equals 0, x is less than str.length, x plus plus. Okay, so for every index in string str here, we're going to go through. We're going to start at index 0, and we're going to keep going for as long as x is less than string.length. Okay, and then each time through, we're going to look at the next string. So we're going to do one thing. First, we're going to add. Okay, we're going to say if, well, we'll add this initial string. If we find a ZP combination later, then we'll go on from there. So we will add copy plus equals str dot care at x. We're going to add that character. okay? Then we're going to check to see if it's a Z. So if, first thing we want to do, there's no point checking, by the way, if we're one less than the last character. So let's explain this in Paint. Okay, so here we have a string. Whoop, I'm going to do this. This is our string array. Okay, and we have some characters here at the start and some characters here at the end. And then in the middle we have, you know, whatever. I don't know. I was trying to do some tilde type thing. It didn't really want to work. Let's see if I can do that. Yeah, fine, whatever. No, that's real good. All right, so some characters anyway. Okay, so this here would be str.length minus 1. And this index, right, str.length minus 2. And this would be minus 3 and so on. Okay, so what we want, if we're at strength str.length minus 2, there's no way we can have the remaining 3 characters to have a Z something P. Okay, so at that point, we don't need to check. But if we're less than that, if we're at string.length minus 3, then we could check. So let's go through and we're going to see. Okay, so if x is greater than str.length minus 3, then we don't need to worry about the possibility of a Z something P combination, okay? So let's do a not for this. Or let's just do it the other way. Let's, if x is less than string.length minus 2. In that case, we do need to check for the Z. So we'll say if x str.char at x equals Z, okay, and str.char at x plus 2, so 2 more characters later, equals P, then we're going to do something. Okay, we're going to do a couple of things. So number one, we're going to add on the next character, right? So we've already added on the Z. We're going to skip the next character. We're going to add on the P. So we're going to say copy, we're going to say x plus plus is the simplest way. We're just going to skip over that. Okay, so skip over the middle character. And then we don't have to worry about anything else. We're just automatically incrementing x1. Okay, and then we'll come around again. Well, since x was less than string.length minus 2, we'll still execute one more time and we'll grab that P. So let's see how this runs. I think this is good. We return it. Oh, we got to return it. Okay, and then at the end, after the end of the loop, return copy. Okay, so let's see how this goes. I think it's good. Yay. All right, good. All correct. We have that happy message. There it is. Okay, so this is a quick example of loops and strings. If you did not understand this, please come back and watch it again later, slowly. But that's what we're doing here. We made a copy of the string. We scanned through the original string str. Every time we copied over a character, we checked if we had enough space remaining in the string that there could be a Z something P combination. And if there was, then we checked for it. If we did find a ZP combination, then we skipped over the next character because that was not going to be included. Now, of course, there's many ways you could approach this problem. I'm not trying to super optimize anything here. I'm just going with the first solution I see because I'm coding for speed, not for whatever, not for fanciness. All right. Anyway, we have reached the end of our day, so I'm going to stop the recording